guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. So like you saw in the intro, today we're making some soulful, jazzy, deep house vibes. Real feel-good stuff. The inspiration for this comes from artists like Saison, Local Options, and labels like No Fuss Records. What we've got here is a real kind of classic soulful sound. Nice, warm, brushy sounding percussion and hats mixed with some kind of improvised real-world instrumentation. Really cool stuff. As always, there's a link in the description to the project files so you can download those, take a look through, see all of the MIDI, all of the processing in more detail, the patches that I've made, all of that kind of stuff. And that can really help solidify your learning from this video. The project download is from my Patreon, and Patreon is an amazing platform to help support creators and one of the best ways that you can support me and support the channel. So jump over there and take a look. By signing up, you get access to all of the project files from all of the videos, so there's a whole lot of content here. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into Ableton and let's get deep. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is the project that I've put together for this kind of soulful, jazzy, deep house in the style of Saison, Local Options, No Fuss Records, that type of thing. As always, there's a bit of variety in the style of these artists in this label, but what I've done is focused on the kind of more jazzy, live instrumentation kind of style that's really along the lines of what Saison does, as it's pretty unique in the current climate of music, and it's also a bit different to what I've focused on the channel before. So that said, let's just take a look. Take a listen. There we go. So important to note here that this project is made in Ableton Live 11, so you'll need the latest version of Ableton Live 11 to open the project if you're going to download it. Link in description if you want to grab that from my Patreon. Having a look at the project tempo, we're at 124, and I would say anything between 120 and 125 is pretty normal for this style of music. I think like 122, 23 is like really common. All right, so let's just jump into it with the kick. We've got a kick that's actually made up of two kicks. This one here is actually sampled from a Saison track. I'll link to a video up here if you want to go and check that out about how I've sampled any kick from any track pretty much. Jump up, have a look at that, really good. Then we've got a top kick, which is just from a loop. So it's kind of like the top of a kick with a tambourine or something on top. Just gives it some nice like high fizz, and that helps it to cut through the mix. So all I'm doing is actually using this utility to just play the right side. So that's just down the middle. I think there was more of the top sound on the right side. And then I'm using this utility here to mono this kick. It's just giving us a nice solid low end right down the center. Not much else to say about the kick, to be honest. Now onto the claps. This is really cool. What we've got here is a kind of analog drum machine style clap, like a 909 kind of thing. Nice, tough, gritty sound. Then we've got this hand clap. And what I've done here is I've taken the same sample, put it onto two channels, one left, one right. They've just panned a little bit each side. And I've pitched one down by one semitone and one up by one semitone. And this is to get them like out of the way of each other from a phase kind of perspective. So they're going to sound like they're kind of slightly different samples. The idea here is to give it like a really human hand clap vibe. To enhance that, what I've done is I've taken a utility here and I've swapped the panorama around on this. So the left is going to play on the right is going to play on the left. So that just puts them in a different panorama to the other hand clap. Each of them has some random velocity. And what I've done in the MIDI, they're playing the same pattern, but I've just moved them all slightly off the grid. So if you hold Alt on your keyboard, you can move them, see it removes the grid there, so I can just move it freely across there. And I've done that to each note individually, moved it slightly different timing. So if I click between these MIDI clips, you can see that the notes just shift a little bit. So that's going to kind of help with this like live feel. So let's have a listen to that. Then with the punchy analog one on top, so really nice warm vibes there with a lot of depth and a kind of really humanized feel. I've got this snare here, which is just a kind of analog drum machine sounding snare. This is the MIDI pattern, but it kind of, I'm doing a bit of processing to it, which makes it sound a bit more like a percussion sound. It's got a lot of reverb on it, so it's kind of sitting a bit in the background, adding some real vibe and character to the loop. So let's just have a look at the processing on that. Take it all off. I'll leave this EQ, I'm just cutting out the subs, but I've got reverb, reverb, kind of reverb. So this is the sound without any processing. Then the spectral resonator just helps to kind of grit it up and give it a bit more vibe. Then I've got this hybrid reverb, a snare plate digital vintage. So again, that helps to give it even more vibe. It's got some pre-delay on those, which helps to give it this quite unique sound. Then I've got some reverb, and this is like kind of giving it a real atmosphere and pushing it into the back of the mix a bit. Now in the hats, what we're going for here is to have something that's quite brushy, warm, not too aggressive sounding. First up here, we've got this open hat. So I've sampled this from a loop. Really great way to get your drums is just to listen to some loops and hear things that you like, and then take them out and use them as one-shots. So we can see just from the waveform here that it's got a nice sharp transient, which is going to punch through the mix, but it's also got some attack, which helps to make it sound not so aggressive. It's a bit more warm sounding. It's nice and bright and it's going to sit on top. I've paired it with another hat, which I've sampled from a Saison track. Here we've got a MIDI pattern, so it's just playing once on the offbeat and then it's playing like a double hit on the next one. So you can see that those two sounds are quite complementary. One's a little bit lower, one's a bit brighter, and then they are spread out a little bit on the panorama. So it's making this nice wide open hat sound. Then I've got a shaker. I'm just pitching it down by 2 semitones and I'm putting a bit of erosion. And that's to bring the sound down so it's not so bright. So it's got a bit more body. Without this. So I just feel like it sits nicer in the track here. That has some MPC 16 swing 57. That's the swing that I'm using on the whole project. And then what I'm doing is I'm playing with the note length and the velocity here to just give it some groove. So that's kind of giving it this like humanized feel with the shaker, like someone was playing on an egg shaker or something. Next we've got a tambourine. I got it from a tambourine loop. Let's have a listen to that. So I'll just drag it here. not quite what I wanted, but I really like the texture and the vibe of it. What I've done is put it into a simpler and hit slices mode. Now I can actually play those like individual hits, and I've just found a nice pattern that works. It's adding some groove and vibe to the loop, but it's not as chaotic as the actual full tambourine loop. So it really nicely fills out that high end of the track and keeps it like fresh and interesting. I'm just using that to kind of create this like hooky groove in the background. After the break, I add in a 909 ride. This helps to kind of pick up the energy. I'm starting it at the 1, and then it loops this section of the MIDI loop. That's because I don't want it to start playing like half of a ride, but I do want it to continue to play full notes. So a really cool trick there to do with longer percussion sounds in your MIDI sequencing. Next, let's have a look at the percussion. I've got a conga, and this is again coming from a loop. Let's take a listen. So actually more of a bongo, but I'm just doing the same thing as I did with the tambourines. I'm using different hits to play my own groove with the sound. So I've got like a nice little repetitive motif at the start of the bar, and then I'm creating variation by changing it up in the second half of each bar. Really works well with the groove. I've also got this live drum fill, which I just found from auditioning different loops, and I'm just adding on a bit of overdrive to that to bring it up, give it a bit more presence. So without it, punches through the mix nicely. So let's have a look at these congas. I've just got a little bit of delay to add some vibe, and then a bit of glue compression, just helping to control the dynamics, and of course some LFO tool to sidechain it to the kick. So let's have a listen to all of the drums together. Nice groovy loop, warm and alive sounding, interesting and energetic, but not as aggressive as something you might find in like tech house. Nice warm brushy sounds. So let's have a look at the bass. Here's the MIDI. We're just playing in E minor, and we've got a little bit of variation here just to keep things interesting, and I've got a little octave fill at the end of the bar. So let's take a listen. And with the groove, so really simple sound on this actually. I've got a sawtooth and a sub. The sub just has a little bit of tone on it, which is just helping it to cut through the mix. The sawtooth is up an octave from the sub. We've got some filter taking away all of that kind of high frequency. And it's got a bit of resonance and drive. It's a 24 dB filter, and I'm using envelope 2 to modulate the filter cutoff. Now you'll notice here that I'm using this velocity randomization, and then in the matrix I've got some velocity sensitivity on the amplification. So that means when it plays a higher velocity, it's going to be louder. So I noticed when I was listening to reference tracks that the bass on these tracks wasn't as loud in the mix as it might be in a more clubby style like tech house or something. Because it's not so loud and not so driving, it means that there's more room for variation like this. And it gives it like a more live feel, like someone was playing it on a bass or on a synthesizer. I've also added some more modulation to the filter frequency so that when a higher note is played, it's going to be more open on the frequency. And that is for this octave note at the end of the bar. So this is going to have the filter a bit more open. I'm just adding a bit of processing here to dirty up the sound and control the dynamics. We've got a sidechain, we'll just leave that on. Let's just turn off the saturation. Nice subtle saturation, just adds a bit more body to the low end. I'm just cutting off the lowest subs there. Let's get onto the melodic elements, which is a big part of the track. So first up, I've got these Rhodes chords. I just used the scale function to show me here in green which are the notes in the scale. And I've just like literally programmed these in with my mouse paintbrush tool, added a bit of velocity variation in the lower notes, and then just kind of changed it up from chord to chord so it kind of has a bit of a different feel. To be honest, I'm not even sure if these are real chords, but it sounds cool and it sounds jazzy and it gives the vibe that I'm after. I really just got this by experimentation. There is some cool stuff happening to humanize it. So what I'm doing is I've added some velocity randomization, as I like to do, and then in the MIDI, I'm using this groove here called organ, which let's take a look at the groove pool. So you can see there that's got 10% random. Now what that's doing is shifting it randomly 10% off the grid. So if I apply that, we can see here it's shifted those notes all slightly off the grid. Now the reason for doing this and for doing the velocity randomization is that when someone's actually playing the keys, they're not going to be hitting the notes exactly at the same time or exactly at the same velocity. So this really just helps to give it a more live, a more humanized feel. So we can hear there that there's a filter, which is just helping to introduce these chords, and then it also brings them out in the break here. So these are coming from a Rhodes patch, which is part of Ableton Live Suite. So I'll make sure to freeze these in case you don't have Suite. But if you do have Suite, then this is like an extra download that you can download for free. I'm just using this amp and this chorus ensemble to add some vibe and some grit. Now I've got another Rhodes part, which is coming from a different sound from the same live pack. And what I've done here is added these improvised little riffs. I'm not a keys player. I'm really not. What I did to get these is I just did a big long take, which you can see in the MIDI here. And I used the Ableton push, and I set the scale of the push to be E minor, so that all of the pads on the push are representing the keys of E minor. And then I literally just did a big long take until I felt like there might be something that I can use. And then I went through that and found these like 4 different variations that I was able to use. It's like a really fun, easy way to get some kind of improvisation into your tracks. And I noticed this was something that Saison did a lot in their tracks. So to help add a bit more sparkle to that sound, because this is sitting quite high above the other Rhodes sound and above the other instrumentation. So to add a little more sparkle to that, I've just added this overdrive. So without the overdrive, so you can see that really just pushes it up and makes it sit right present up in the high frequency. Now I'm adding a little bit of reverb and a little bit of ping pong delay. These are just part of my standard template. So this is the reverb. And this is the ping pong. Got a high string, sampled from my Roland JV1010, RIP, it's not working. Really cool little box though. If you're looking to get maybe like your first piece of hardware, I think you can get one on eBay for between €1 and €200, and it's got so many like iconic sounds in there. So I can recommend that if you're in the market for something. But yeah. Just a high string, don't think it would be a deep house track without it. Next up, we've got a sax sample. So what I did to get this, I searched on Loop Cloud. I think I searched in like the genre of jazz. This is like a long improvised sax take. It starts like this. What I did with that is I just went through and found myself like a little hooky part that I liked, that I thought was more memorable than having like this 1-minute sax improvisation. So that's the bit that I decided on being the hook. All I've done is like taken some of the audio and chopped it up and used it to create my own little hook, like tease the sample in a bit. And then in the break, I let a longer section of the improvised sample play. So let's hear that again with the beat. So So that works really nicely. So I'm really not good at playing the keys or anything. When I do play things in, I'm playing with this, not this. Needless to say, I don't play saxophone either. So what I tend to do with this kind of thing is look for samples that I can use, chop up, change, and make them my own. Other alternatives that you could do to Splice or Loop Cloud is getting a session player to play something for you, or sampling something from a record, or you could try programming it yourself in MIDI with maybe like a contact library or something like that. But when I was listening to reference tracks, I noticed that a lot of the tracks did have some kind of live instrumentation in them. So let's have a look at the vocals quickly. I've just got this jazzy vocal. I'll take off this echo so we can hear it. What I'm doing is I want that to kind of sound like a sample from a record or something. I'm just using this glue compressor to control the dynamics. I've pitched it down from F to E just by one semitone. And then I've added some echo to help extend it out a bit. And after the echo, I've put this redux and I'm bringing that down to 8-bit. And the reason I'm doing this is to mimic the feel of an old school analog sampler, like a MPC 2000 or something like that. So you can really hear it actually when I'm playing it with the echo. Kind of adds some real lo-fi. Really nice. So that just helps to kind of add some vibe to the rest of the track. Next up, I've got this vocal, which is like just a crowd bar kind of sound, and it's really low in the mix. If I turn this one off and then play it here, you can hear it's really not in front, it's in the back, but it's just adding some vibe. So it's from a longer sample and I've got it looped over 2 bars, just to kind of give it this like repetitive but humanized feel in the background. It's subliminal, it's all about the vibe. Now effects are really simple, nothing too over the top, but a crash here which has got a delay on it to extend it out a bit. I've got this reversed crash. I've got a white noise riser, which I've taken a lot of the high end off. This is just to create some anticipation at the end of the break, but I took that high end off it so that it's kind of more in the background. It's not so in your face. This is like quite laid back music, and you don't want things to be too over the top. And finally, I've got this vinyl sound, which is just from the start of a record that I recorded. I'm just cutting out any of the low kind of subs, which there are some. And then I'm using the glue compressor with a really fast attack to just control some of those bigger peaks. And this is kind of working together with this background vocal. Just to create this nice bed for the track to sit in, like an atmosphere, an environment for the track to live in. So let's just talk quickly about the arrangement. I'm adding things to kind of build up to this break. I introduce the saxophone, which I guess is the main hook of the track, and then in the break I let this improvised sample play all the way through, which adds a lot of interest to the break, and it helps to really kind of define it as its own section. I'm also dropping out most of the drums, so if we hear the drums, it's just this, as opposed to this. And the reason for this is just to keep the kind of idea of the groove going so that it's not just empty, but it's so that the saxophone can really shine and be the star of the show in here. So the way that I've used this sample is quite purposeful. This here at the end is actually the hook, or the bit that I'm repeating. It's got this kind of improvised bit which sounds quite random, then you hear the familiar part, which is also extended a bit, and then it drops back into the beat. You'll see here, I've used this envelope to take out some of the notes, but in this part here, I'm playing them. So let's just take a listen through this break and you'll kind of see what I mean. I'm really using the content of the song to create the anticipation rather than relying on a lot of effects and white noise and things. So you can hear at the end of the break there how that kind of familiar riff really works to kind of signal that, right, here we are, it's time to go back to the groove. And to help build more anticipation at the end of the break, I'm opening the filter on these chords, which I had brought down to help to signal that the break is happening, let the sax be more in front, sending it to this big washy reverb to help kind of build up some atmosphere, and then the drums are also being sent to the same reverb. But there's not so many drums, so it doesn't create too much of a crazy effect. We want it to be subtle. Anyway, that's about that. I hope you enjoyed it. It was really fun making this one, and as I said before, link in the description if you want to grab a copy of the project file so you can go through, see a bit more detail about how I've done everything, how I've put together these patches, the effects that I'm using. I think it really adds some value to what you're learning from the video. So there you have it, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. It was super fun to make. Such good vibes on this. Why not drop me a comment and let me know what other artists you'd like to see featured on the channel. And if you're liking these housey vibes, then check out this video I did on Dario D'Artis. Anyway, that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace!